Got asthma, depression, arthritis, can't sleep, anything. There is always a pill for that, and a good chance you'd recognize the name brand of those medications, because lots of those commercials you see on TV today are drug advertisements. If you flip the channel, especially on certain channels at certain times, it's almost all you see. So Alex Miller joins us now talking about this growing industry, because there's got to be a reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, since I started working on this story, I've been a little bit paying more attention to it, and it's like they're everywhere.
Yeah.
More than a decade ago, drug manufacturers were spending about $3 billion on drug advertising. That number has skyrocketed, and it's not changing anytime soon.
Prescription ads bombard your television screen.
Ask your doctor about Cialis for daily use.
Ask your gastroenterologist about Humira.
Ask your doctor if Lyrica's right for you.
Telling you they can take away your pain. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself why you are the one asking your doctor for a prescription when they are the ones who diagnose you? The short answer? It's all about the cash. Drug ads are extremely lucrative. While most other industries had flatlined their spending, this kind of ad space is only growing. Since 2012, media analyst Kantar Media says spending is up 64%. The medication advertised is a brand, meaning it's expensive. Some can cost hundreds of dollars for a month or two's supply, when typically a doctor may have just prescribed the generic instead. But now, according to Kantar, pharma is the 6th largest ad category in America, racking up $6.4 billion in growth. But it hasn't always been this way. In fact, before 1997, the FDA heavily regulated these ads and almost none existed. Pharma reps went instead straight to doctors to sell their medications. The FDA does review advertisements, but not necessarily before they hit the airwaves. This means millions of eyeballs could see these commercials before the FDA decides whether it should stay on the air. And the U.S. is pretty much alone on this. Direct-to-consumer ads are illegal everywhere else with the exception of New Zealand. And the space is only evolving. Since the late 90s, most ads have appealed to common ailments like arthritis.
If you have a big blockbuster drug with a large patient population, then you're likely to advertise that drug.
Now, there's a new push for the niche patient populations. We're talking medication for aging Americans and even cancer drugs.
Now, those drugs have a smaller possible set of consumers that might take them, but they're also quite pricey.
Northwestern professor of strategy Amanda Stark says most doctors aren't on board with any of these kinds of ads.
They obviously think one way or another that this is bad for their profession, either because it reduces the amount of autonomy they have or because somebody else is getting a cut of the healthcare pie.
The American Medical Association called for a complete ban of these advertisements in 2015, saying in part, quote, direct-to-consumer advertising also inflates demand for new and more expensive drugs, even when these drugs may not be appropriate.
If you ask for a branded drug, even if there is a generic that does something similar but not identical on the market, they might still give you that branded drug because you've asked for it, and they don't want to get into an extended discussion about why one is better than the other.
And because of the booming success of these ads, without real regulation, drug companies continue to explore expansion while doctors are left answering to their patients.
So one of the biggest issues about this is that these ads can go on the air without being approved by the FDA. So in the next hour, I talked to a congresswoman who's been fighting this for more than a decade.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And people like me who look at WebMD that you're like, you see it enough times, you think you need it.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe you don't.
And they might give it to you anyways.
All right. Congressman DeLauro coming up.
Yep.
Alex Miller joins us now because you spoke to a congresswoman who's been tackling this issue, who doesn't want the free-for-all as it stands.
Exactly. So Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro first introduced this legislation more than 12 years ago, when drug advertisements weren't even a fraction as popular as they are today. Now, yet 7 congressional sessions later, she is still having trouble even getting members on board. Your bill in last Congress wanted to place a 3-year moratorium on drug advertising of these newly approved drugs. Why do you feel like that kind of time frame was warranted?
Because the FDA is not mandated to approve these drugs before they hit the market. So we introduced the legislation in 2005 to say that, no, let's not ban advertising, because then you get into all kinds of constitutional questions about freedom of speech, but let's take a 3-year moratorium. That way, you have an opportunity to look at what are adverse effects, what's new scientific data, what are some of the ways in which we can find out how this drug is working.
Isn't the onus, though, at some point on either the consumer to do their research or the doctor? It's not like a over-the-counter where they can just go buy it.
The consumer is not going to do the research. The consumer is looking for relief from whatever it is.
Those on the other side say it increases treatment awareness and consumer knowledge. What do you say to that?
I say that I think it just increases the opportunity for pharmaceutical companies to increase their profits. That the FDA, I might add, I think it was in 2003, they went to Purdue Pharma and they said, get OxyContin off, because the discovery was that it was creating a major difficulty. And Purdue Pharma did take it off. They said that they didn't have to, because the FDA does not have that mandatory authority. Do I believe the FDA should have that mandatory authority? Absolutely. They ought to pre-approve when the drug is approved, that we ought to have a pre-approval of the advertising on these drugs.
You've been watching this since 2005, so you know how much it's increased. These, advertisements were probably not as big when you started.
It's off the charts now.
Yeah, now it's
off
the majority of what we see.
That's
right.
Do
you see it stopping without any sort of regulation?
No, I do not. And there is, I continue to have, an interest in it, and I am told, even though we talk about 3 years as a moratorium, that you're going to run into the constitutional issues of freedom of speech. Well, I think we're looking at the health and the safety of the American people. We're not talking here about a road or a bridge. We're talking about people's lives and the potential, for a problem.
Why do you think it hasn't passed in 12 years?
Well, because I think we're looking at an industry that has great sway, and it's a lobbying effort that overshadows the ability to put the kinds of pressure both on them and on the FDA to say, no, we need to pre-approve, and in the Congress in terms of really directing the FDA, giving them mandatory authority to pull advertising off, and giving them mandatory authority to approve the product before it goes on the air.
So the first thing, Alex, that popped into my mind, and DeLauro is a proud progressive, Democrats did have control of the House and Senate while this has been up for debate, and it didn't pass.
No, I mean, she said that a lot of people, really subscribe to this drug industry, that they come in and they don't, lobbyists donate a lot of money, and it becomes kind of an issue.
And we're not stopping. She predicts that we could see this even accelerate.
Yeah, we already are. We're seeing drugs to combat other drugs. So if you're taking opioids, we're now seeing medicine for constipation because of opioids. And even further, there are companies that are trying to get their drugs approved that might not necessarily have had that drug be the original intent. So if you think about if you take a drug for asthma, but it might help you lose weight, something like that, they want to be able to advertise those other side effects as well as a use for the drug.
Okay. Wow. Without being approved for that use, they want to still be able to advertise it.
Right, exactly. And right now, the FDA you don't have to get approval from the FDA before you advertise on TV. So, when you watch those commercials, they say the side effects at the very end, but there's lots of music and very pretty people at the end. So you kind of miss those things. And basically what Congresswoman DeLauro is saying is, these can be misleading and you might not know until the end.
All right. Alex, thank you.